Imagine yourself, after 8 years of a seemingly perfect marriage, discovering the betrayal of the person you loved most with someone extremely close. That's exactly what happened to Jean. Married to Scarlett, a charming woman who was the love of his life, Jean had a relationship that many envied. But everything crumbles when he decides to make a surprise visit to his cousin John and finds them together in a scene he never expected to witness in John's kitchen. What follows is a story of betrayal, pain, and a quest for justice that leads Jean down unexpected paths and to an absolutely shocking ending. It was a sunny summer afternoon, hot and full of promises, when Jean decided to visit his cousin John. After an intense workout at the gym, he felt his muscles pulsing with renewed vigor, a feeling of strength that propelled him not only physically, but also in his thoughts and actions. With this energy, he thought it would be a good time for a surprise visit. Jean and John shared a life story together that went beyond the family bond. They were like brothers, growing up side by side, sharing secrets, challenges, and accomplishments. The trust between them was deep, forged over years of mutual support and understanding. Jean, now married to Scarlett for 8 years, found in his marriage a safe haven. Scarlett, with her smile that lit up any room and eyes that hid unfathomable mysteries, seemed the perfect companion, complementing Jean's life with love and an almost palpable serenity. On that day, as he headed to John's house, Jean was carefree, hoping perhaps to chat about the day, future plans, or just enjoy his cousin's company over a cold beer. Upon arriving at John's house, Jean let himself be guided by the sound of laughter escaping through the half-open kitchen door. Curious and slightly excited at the prospect of surprising John in a relaxed moment, he walked silently to the window, part of him eager to capture his cousin's look of surprise upon seeing him. What should have been a simple visit turned into a decisive moment without Jean realizing it. As he peeked through the window, the scene that unfolded before him was like a punch in the stomach, momentarily robbing him of his breath. There was Scarlett, his wife, entwined in John's arms in a way that had never been reserved for him. The laughter that had once sounded innocent now carried a tone of intimacy that John had never imagined possible between them. The exchanged glances, the intertwined hands, everything screamed a betrayal not only of love, but a betrayal of the friendship and trust John had placed in both of them. In an instant, the images before him tore the veil of the reality Jean knew, revealing a much darker and more painful truth. With his heart beating erratically and his mind consumed by a whirlwind of thoughts, Jean stepped back from the window, the images of the betrayal etched onto his retina. The pain that spread across his chest was almost physical, and he struggled to understand how the two people he trusted most had been capable of such an act. Feeling an overwhelming mixture of anger, betrayal, and disillusionment, he walked away, his presence still unnoticed by the two. Long minutes passed as Jean remained motionless in John's garden, trying to digest the reality that had just crumbled before him. Scarlett and John's joyful voices could still be heard, cruelly contrasting with the emotional chaos Jean was facing. After some time, the decision was made. He would not confront the traitors at that moment. Instead, he chose to leave, leaving behind the house that now harbored only lies and disappointment. With heavy steps and an even heavier heart, Jean returned to his car, each step taking him further away from the life he thought he had. In the days following the discovery of the betrayal, Jean found himself enveloped in a layer of coldness and calculation. Each of his movements was meticulously planned, each decision a piece on the chessboard he was assembling for his revenge. He contacted a private detective, a professional recommended by a trusted colleague, and began compiling a list of evidence revealing the extent of Scarlett and John's betrayal. The investigation was swift and effective, revealing not only encounters at John's house, but in various other locations over the course of months. With photos and messages captured, John felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and revulsion at seeing the naked, raw reality before him. Armed with this evidence, he confronted Scarlett and John separately. The confrontation with Scarlett was marked by tears and pleas for forgiveness, as she tried to touch his heart and guilt. On the other hand, the meeting with John was icy, with John unable to maintain eye contact, his excuses sounding empty and automatic. In both cases, John remained steadfast, his heart shielded against the emotions that tried to invade his decision to end those chapters of his life. Jean's revenge culminated in a family gathering, carefully planned to take place at his parents' home, a place where everyone associated with unions and celebrations. On that day, however, the atmosphere was charged with tension, and curious glances from relatives turned towards Jean as he positioned himself in the center of the room, the evidence of betrayal in hand. The silence was almost palpable as Jean began to speak, his voice firm, although his hands trembled slightly as he revealed photos and messages exchanged between Scarlett and John. Public humiliation was not what Jean desired, but he felt it was necessary to expose the truth to clear his name and conscience. As each piece of evidence was shown, murmurs of shock and disapproval grew among the relatives. Scarlett, present, shrank with each look of disdain cast in her direction, while John, also there, tried unsuccessfully to argue, his voice muffled by the family's indignation. After revealing all the evidence, Jean announced that he would be divorcing Scarlett and cutting all ties with John. The family's reaction was one of support for Jean, many approaching to offer words of comfort and solidarity. Jean, though grateful, felt each hug and each word as a reminder of what he had lost. But the most shocking was yet to come. Jean revealed that he was leaving everything behind, moving to another country to start a new life, far from the memories and betrayals that had marked him so deeply. As he organized his last days in the city, Jean devoted himself to resolving all pending matters with silent efficiency. He was determined not to leave any loose ends that could hinder his new beginning. This included selling his house, a beautiful residence that he and Scarlett had bought together and decorated with dreams of a future for two. With every object he packed, every room he emptied, Jean felt a mixture of relief and sadness. His car, bought with such pride years ago, was also sold, as was his stake in the business he had with John, definitively severing the professional and personal ties that bound them. The divorce process was surprisingly quick, perhaps because Scarlett also wanted to end that situation as quickly as possible. The documents were signed in a cold and impersonal office, where the last words exchanged were mere legal formalities. As he left that office, Jean felt as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders, but also as if a part of him had been torn away. The news of the divorce and the circumstances surrounding it spread like wildfire in the small community where Jean and Scarlett had lived. Close friends and acquaintances, some of whom had attended their wedding, now whispered on street corners and at social gatherings, shaking their heads in disapproval or compassion. As Jean prepared for his final departure, many came to offer him support and solidarity, surprised and shocked by the revelations. Scarlett, in turn, found herself increasingly isolated, her attempts to reach out to friends often meeting cold or evasive responses. Jean noticed the change in people's attitudes as he walked around the city, the looks of pity, curiosity, or respect. Each interaction reinforced his decision to leave everything behind. He visited places that had been important to him and Scarlett, silently bidding farewell to each memory associated with them. Meanwhile, John desperately tried to reconnect with the friends and family who had drifted away, his explanations and excuses often falling on deaf ears. With the final preparations for his move underway, Jean often found himself lost in reflections on what the future held. He had chosen a European country, known for its cities steeped in history and vibrant culture, as his new home. As he packed his belongings, each item seemed to tell a story, some with smiles, others with tears. Jean had already arranged an apartment in the city center, near cafes and bookstores, a perfect environment for him to start over. He imagined himself walking down narrow streets, capturing new images and stories through his lens, perhaps even finding a new passion for photography. In the last few weeks before his departure, Scarlett tried several times to contact him, sending messages ranging from apologies to pleas for reconciliation. Jean, however, remained firm in his decision, blocking her last attempt at communication. The pain of the betrayal was still fresh, and he knew that any attempt at reconciliation would only be an invitation for further disillusion. Instead, he focused on his plans, hoping that a change of scenery could bring the peace he so desperately sought. Finally, the day of Jean's departure arrived. The airport was bustling, but inside Jean reigned a tranquil silence. He had bid farewell to the few friends and family members who decided to accompany his last days in the city, each embrace laden with wishes of happiness and success in his new life. At the airport, there were no dramatic scenes or tears. The farewell was a silent affirmation of his decision, a confident step into the unknown. As he boarded the plane, Jean chose a window seat, allowing himself one last look at the city that had been his home for so many years. The city lights twinkled below, mingling with the stars in the night sky, and as the plane gained altitude, Jean felt a sense of freedom he had not experienced in a long time. The pain and betrayal were being left behind, and for the first time in many months, he allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope and excitement for what was to come. Upon arriving at his new destination, Jean was immediately captivated by the vibrant energy of the European city. His apartment, located in the heart of the center, was cozy and full of charm, with a small balcony overlooking a busy street where he could observe daily urban life with a cup of coffee in hand. The first few weeks were dedicated to exploring every corner, every narrow street and historic square. Jean was surprised by how easily he began to feel part of this new culture, absorbing every new flavor, sound, and aroma. He spent hours in local cafes and bookstores, places that quickly became his favorite havens. During these wanderings, Jean began capturing scenes of daily life with his camera, enchanted by the way the light spilled over the old buildings and the expressions of the people he crossed paths with. Each new image was a step in his journey of healing, a reminder that life could indeed offer new beginnings. Jean felt increasingly that, despite all he had suffered, he was now on the right path, one of renewal and discovery. In the months that followed, Jean delved even deeper into his newfound passion for photography. Enrolled in a local course, he honed his techniques and began to develop a unique style that captured not only the architectural beauties of the city, but also subtle and impactful human moments. The camera became his constant companion, a portal through which he explored and documented his new life. His talent did not go unnoticed. An owner of a small cafe, enchanted by the photos Jean casually showed during a visit, offered to exhibit his work. The exhibition was a modest success, attracting both locals and tourists who admired Jean's sensitivity in portraying urban life. Through this platform, he began receiving commissions for portraits and urban scenes, and his network of contacts grew. Jean felt revitalized, as if every click of his camera helped to rebuild what had been lost in his former life. The daily interactions at the cafe and photo sessions became moments of genuine connection, bringing new friendships and unexpected opportunities. One of these new connections was Eva, a lover of books and art who worked as a librarian in the city. Eva and Jean met by chance during the exhibition of his photographs at the cafe. She approached him with a warm smile, praising his ability to capture the essence of urban life with such emotion and depth. Intrigued by her perceptiveness and charm, Jean quickly found himself drawn to Eva's passion for culture and knowledge. She introduced him to new authors and works of art, while he shared the world through his lens with her. Their relationship grew rapidly, enriched by long walks through the city, visits to art exhibitions, and nights of debate about literature in cozy cafes. Eva showed Jean aspects of the city he would never have discovered on his own, and he began to see the world in a new way through her eyes. Together, they explored the old and the new, each encounter revealing more layers of their personalities and dreams. While Jean found renewal and hope in his new life, Scarlett faced a path of redemption and rebuilding her own life back in her hometown town. The revelation of her betrayal had left deep marks on her social and professional circles. Many friends and acquaintances drifted away, leaving her in painful isolation. Determined to change the narrative of her life, Scarlett dove into new projects and attempts to reconnect with the community. But the shadows of her past actions often made themselves present, complicating her efforts. She participated in support groups and volunteered, seeking ways to contribute positively to society. Each small victory was a step in her journey of redemption, though the path was arduous and full of reminders of her past. Scarlett learned that rebuilding trust and respectability would require time and genuine change, a lesson she faced daily as she struggled to overcome her mistakes and start anew. 1 year after his arrival in Europe, Jean felt ready to take an even more significant step in his new life. He decided to open his own photography gallery. With the support of Eva, who was now not only his partner on city walks but in life, they worked together to transform an old space in the Arts District into a welcoming and inspiring gallery. Eva brought her knowledge of art and literature, helping to curate exhibitions that engaged in dialogue with Jean's photographs, creating an environment that celebrated the intersection of diverse forms of artistic expression. The opening of the gallery was a moment of celebration, marked by the presence of new and old friends, art lovers, and even curious bystanders, drawn by the positive vibe of the place. The gallery quickly became a meeting point for cultural discussions and exhibitions, a place where people could connect through art. For Jean, each day at the gallery was a confirmation of his resilience and ability to rebuild his life, a living testament that it was possible to start over and thrive after adversity. However, just as Jean was beginning to feel completely re-established in his new life, the past knocked on his door in an unexpected way. During the opening night of his gallery, among the many guests celebrating the new art space, Jean noticed a familiar figure that made his heart stop for an instant. Jean. He had traveled there, apparently determined to confront the past and seek some kind of reconciliation or understanding with Jean. Jean's presence brought an immediate tension to the environment, and Jean felt a mixture of surprise and resentment at seeing him. Approaching cautiously, Jean expressed his remorse for past actions and explained how his life had crumbled after the events that destroyed his relationship with Jean. He spoke of losses, learning, and a painful quest for redemption. Jean, confronted with the man he once considered more than a cousin, but a brother, found himself divided between the old pain and the evidence of Jean's suffering. Looking at Jean felt a whirlwind of emotions, but the main one was indifference. Time and distance had healed his wounds, and now, in front of Jean, he realized there was no more pain or anger, only a quiet acceptance of the past. With surprising calm, Jean told Jean there was nothing to forgive, for he had already moved on and built a new life, a life he loved, and in which Jean had no more space. Jean ended the conversation, wishing Jean luck on his journey of redemption, turning back to the guests of his gallery, where Eva waited with an encouraging smile. By her side, Jean felt complete, immersed in a present that was everything he desired and nothing he feared. And what would you do in Jean's place? Comment on what you would do. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to keep following more stories like this. Jean's life was turned upside down, but he found the strength to start over elsewhere, away from the pain and betrayals. His journey shows us that sometimes the end of something can just be the beginning of a new story. I'll see you in a new story.